The Vampire Diaries was originally created as a series of novels by Lisa J. Smith, later adapted and developed for television by Kevin Williamson and Julie Plec. It's a supernatural tale of thriller and romance about a 17-year-old girl named Elena Gilbert and the various threats that loom over her life and the lives of her friends and family. Set in the early 2010s in a fictional town of Mystic Falls, Virginia, Elena, played by Nina Dobrev, tries to get back into living a normal high school life while grieving from the recent death of her parents. Both Elena and her younger brother Jeremy, played by Stephen R. McQueen, are under legal guardianship of their Aunt Jenna, played by Sarah Canning. Elena's best friends, Caroline Forbes and Bonnie Bennett, played by Candace King and Kat Graham, want to help Elena transition back into normality as easily as possible. However, whenever there's a high school, there's drama. Elena finds herself fresh off a breakup with her childhood best friend. However, she finds herself quickly swept up by the affections of a new guy in town, Stefan Salvatore, played by Paul Wesley. The pair grow close through hanging out. However, as things grow strange in the lands of Mystic Falls, Elena recognizes a pattern that Stefan is hiding something from her. His strange behavior sparks her curious side, and after a bit of research, she comes to the conclusion that Stefan is a vampire. Having to keep his secret and decide for herself whether or not she's in love with him, Elena's life falls into a series of mysticism, pain, and suffering. And Stefan isn't the only vampire in town. Now, I know that summary was pretty vague, but going through every individual detail of the plot is something that's gonna take forever, and honestly, I don't really have the time for it in videos like this. There are plenty of other YouTube channels who have done videos breaking down scene by scene, and I'm not gonna be one that does that this time. What I am here to do instead is keep track of essential story elements, talk about the characters and their development process, and give my own personal thoughts and opinions on them. So without further ado, let's get started with Elena. Elena Gilbert is the literally me girl of the series. She was written to be inherently innocent and fragile before thrown into a world of witches and vampires, and has to learn to live with that fact and that her life will never be the same again. Nina Dobrev plays the character well enough on that front. She can be cute and normal when the story tries to keep her innocence, and she can be brave and strong-willed when things get out of hand on the mysticism side. She's not given the greatest direction when it comes to the more serious moments of the show. I felt as though the fact that she was young and inexperienced as an actor was pretty obvious during certain emotional beats throughout this season. But overall, she made it to be a character that the audience relates to, and for the most part on a first viewing, I think that idea was executed fairly well. Her journey is meant to reflect a coming-of-age theme, but because it's tied into supernatural elements of the series, Elena as a character doesn't actually get focused on all that much as an individual. Her development is strictly based upon her relationship with the Salvatore brothers, and she grows stronger because of them, which is fine, but she's not actively sharing the screen with them all the time, and when she isn't, she's just an ear for other characters to get things off their chest. She herself feels ordinary, which is needed in a show about vampires killing each other, but that ordinary feeling works less than it does with a character like Matt, for example, who I'll get into in just a bit. What I'm trying to say is, Elena tries to stay ordinary, but because she's involved with the Salvatores, she can't be, which makes her less interesting in scenes where she tries to be normal. It's almost as if the writers reduce her character to a lesser version of herself, and while it helps to amplify her friends, it unfortunately leaves her in a little bit of an underdeveloped state in comparison. Now, Matt Donovan, Elena's ex-boyfriend, played by Zach Rohrig, is a highlight in this season in my eyes. He begins the season still hung up on Elena, but surprisingly not in a jealous way. He's more of a protective best friend who still has some lingering feelings, but keeps them buried in order to give her space as she deals with grieving the death of her parents. I for one was surprised that a jock character in a CW show was written to be more than just a jock stereotype. Matt's life actually has depth to it. He has an absent mother, a drug addict for a sister, and the responsibility of tending after his family's house all on his shoulders. We don't spend too much time leaning into Matt's thoughts on all of this, but when we do focus on him, he's easily the best part of the season in my opinion. From a less mystical point of view. Having nothing break his way until he unexpectedly finds himself getting closer to Caroline was actually really great. I remember making a prediction for when first starting this show that Elena and Matt were gonna find their way back to each other by the end of the series. And I thought of that in part due to Matt and Elena's chemistry on screen. Zach Rohrig as Matt just works so much better with Nina's Elena in my eyes, which is ironic considering the actor's reputation on set, but we're not going to get into that right now. The concept of human and vampire living happily ever after just never worked in my mind, right from the first episode, so it was only logical to assume that Matt and Elena were going to be the end goal. It also doesn't help that Nina and Paul, who play Elena and Stefan, don't have nearly as much chemistry throughout the season. And speaking of Paul, well, he gives a very particular kind of performance in this show, one that I still don't really have an idea of whether or not it was intentional. Weirdly enough, Stefan is on his A game when he's bickering with his brother Damon. He acts as a very good shoulder to cry on or as a support for the development of others. It makes him really fun to watch when he's interacting with characters like, let's say, Vicky, in trying to teach her how to cope with her eternal vampire powers, or even Lexi when she comes to join him for his birthday. However, despite being that good around all the side characters, Stefan is kind of just bland when he's paired up in scenes with Elena. He just seems so bored and subdued of any personality. It's only ever brought out in the latter half of the season when he's lusting for blood and becomes the one who needs the help aside from the one providing it. But other than that, he and Elena never really felt like the it couple. Damon, on the other hand, is entirely entertaining to watch. I think Ian Somerhalder oozes charisma and plays the bad boy older brother really well, and his chemistry with Paul Wesley's Stefan is really entertaining to watch. While he never really gives an incredible acting performance to point at, his charming allure tends to come from a clear confidence that he has in the role.
Rise and shine, sleepyheads.
Damon, what are you doing? Please.
Oh, stop being smutty.
He's at his best when he's flirting or manipulating people, and he's just as good when he's lashing out emotionally or pretending not to be in order to fool people into believing that he has no redeeming qualities. Jeremy Gilbert, played by Stephen R. McQueen, is a 15-year-old drug dealer hung up on his summer fling, a woman named Vicky Donovan, played by Kayla Ewell. Vicky is Matt's older sister, and yes, somehow an 18-year-old hooking up with a 15-year-old isn't the weirdest creative choice this series is gonna make.
Well, the doctor gave you something, right?
The kid stuff. Nothing with an O in it.
Pointing this out because it's important for two reasons. The first being that this show seemingly gives us no indication of self-awareness at how bad this is, and second, because it's important towards the story. This little fact also marks as the first instance in a trend that will plague the rest of the series moving forward, and for the sake of poking fun, let's start a counter for every instance there's an inappropriate relationship on screen. You see, Vicky eventually becomes a vampire, and their blood cravings combined with the fact that she's an addict makes her an uncontrollable monster that Stefan tries to help, but ultimately has to put down. The trauma on Elena and Jeremy serves as the show's first big instance of change, dampening the high school melodrama for a more focused plot on the supernatural elements. The problem here with Jeremy, however, is that he immediately becomes so much less interesting once Elena asks Damon to wipe his memory of Vicky. Like, I get it, Jeremy having his pain taken away just makes him a normal 15-year-old kid who loses all his edge and grit, but my problem with this segment of the character comes from two different fronts. The first is the acting. I don't think Steven does a really convincing job as a 15-year-old, let alone a completely innocent and study-centric student. And the second, in the way is which his entire personality just changes overnight. Yes, Damon wiped his memory and took his pain away, so that essentially hits the factory reset in his brain, but he doesn't feel like the same kid at all for the rest of this season. He loses all his edge, even at the end with Anna and finding out that she's a vampire and relearning all of the mistakes that Elena made. After all of that, he becomes involved in another subplot with vampires, except now he's boring to watch and feels like he's just taking time away from more important people. We also have Anna, the vampire Jeremy eventually crushes on, who only has one goal, and that's to rescue her mom from the tomb that Bonnie and Sheila opened. She uses Jeremy as leverage to get what she wants, and that's great, but everything that happens afterwards and in consequence with it feels like a bore. Anna should have probably died the moment her mother Pearl did, and at the very least, the show should have gotten around to Jeremy's overdose situation in the finale through a much quicker means. I mean, the drama that Elena was lying and then Uncle John being the one who murdered Anna could have happened much faster and saved us a lot of time in favor of spending it with other more interesting characters. Speaking of characters who take up too much screen time, we have Tyler Lockwood, played by Michael Trevino. And another character that's kinda just around too much, although this time I understand why given the direction he's taken with the whole cliffhanger and his drama in season 2. But did we really need to hammer in the fact that he's a jock asshole so much? These scenes with his parents are mega important, so I'll give the show credit for that. But the constant dick measuring contest with Jeremy over Vicky or Matt got old really fast, and his lashing out scenes could have easily been written into more compelling and more important scenes, rather than scenes that just take time away from what actually matters. And they only just tell us what we know again and again. Now, Matt and Vicky's mom definitely needed less screen time as well. While I guess her inclusion adds a bit more tension to Matt's personal life, thus his relationship with Caroline, did we really need to see a segment of the show focus on her whoring herself out to people like Damon and, oh yeah, Matt's 17-year-old best friend, all for just drama? Yeah, you heard me right, added to the inappropriate relations counter. First it was Vicky and Jeremy. I'd definitely make an argument that Stefan and Damon, being over 145 years old, fiending for 17-year-old Elena, is on the list too. And now we have this one, and we're only just getting started.
She looks so perky in her little short shorts. Just...
A noticeable pattern with all CW shows is how long and drawn out they tend to make their stories, filling out to meet a 23 episode count by creating relationship problems or mini story arcs in between the big moments. You have Tyler's rage, Matt's mom, Jeremy and Anna and her whole tomb cult, Jenna and her ex. All of them set up as important moments for the larger story, but they also all act like time wasters until the moment is met. Let's take Jenna's segment with her news broadcaster ex-boyfriend, for example, who's a member of a secret community of vampire hunters along with the founding family members in Mystic Falls. Logan Fell's only purpose is to give other members word that they didn't succeed in killing off all the vampires in Mystic Falls. But in order to get to that, we have to sit through several episodes of Will They Won't They with Jenna, his eventual death, a resurrection, and a transition into being a vampire, and then another death just to get that point across. Pearl and the other tomb vampires are also for the worse in this season, with them taking up almost the entire second half. Their purpose was to die at the hands of John and the Gilbert device, so why did we have to sit through a civil war with Franklin, or the relationship with Anna and Jeremy, and their will they won't they love story? None of these subplots are necessarily bad, but they just go on too long for their own good. Yes, the whole Frederick Civil War subplot was just to get Stefan back on human blood for a while, but my point is that all these mini storylines take too much time away from developing the characters, or simply just take too long to get to their point. Stefan could have got hooked on blood another way, or 2 episodes prior to the time he actually does it. All these scenes with Pearl and her tomb vampires could have been repurposed into actual character development for characters like, I don't know, Bonnie. Welcome everyone to the Bonnie Bennett segment of the video. Here I'll be going over the injustice the character has faced throughout this season and talking about how criminally underrated she is, despite being literally a top 3 most important character in the series. Let's begin. Bonnie Bennett, a descendant of some of the most powerful witches in the world, spends the entire first half of the season struggling with whether or not she wants to be a part in this life. Once she realizes that she doesn't really have a choice in the matter, she seeks the help of her grandmother to train for her powers, loses her grandmother, and then disappears from the show for 4 episodes to grieve off-screen while we focus on C-plot characters like Pearl and her tomb vampires. Then, once she finally comes back, she has a horrible haircut and a noticeable change in personality. The change makes sense given how she dislikes and distrusts Stefan and Damon after essentially sacrificing the life of her grandmother for their own ambitions, but I for one would have much rather preferred we saw Bonnie change through her grief than witness her character be one way in episode 14 and then another in episode 19. She's gone for 4 episodes. That's 4 episodes spent with lesser characters who we all know won't last or achieve anything in the story moving forward. And then, by the end of the season, she doesn't seem to change at all. She still holds resentment for Stefan and Damon, but spares their lives because she's still a good person. The problem with the finale is that we didn't get enough time to really sit with her and see her open up again emotionally. This acts as the least offensive thing Bonnie will experience in the series, so apologies for everyone who's hoping I'd get into it more. But to put it simply, Bonnie is a strong character with a ton of depth and importance, who unfortunately will continue to consistently be pushed aside in favor of other characters. The fact that a 4-episode disappearance, a noticeable lack in care towards her makeup and wig placements, and a complete character persona change happening off-screen are the least offensive things to happen to this character just gives you a hint at the absolute shit show that's about to come in the later seasons. The disrespect was there from day one, and you best believe I'm going to cover it more as the video series progresses. But for now, let's take a look at some of the good that this season actually accomplishes. Surprisingly, the Vicky Donovan section of this season is a standout, and she as a character along with her brother are really solid in this show. The Donovans get a lot of love in this season, which added further belief in me that Elena would end up with Matt by the end. While juggling the affections of a druggie who genuinely cares for her and a jock who's embarrassed of her, she also becomes a vampire, and the fact that she has to hide it from her brother while not succumbing to the monstrous tendencies, and that makes for some genuinely compelling drama. Her interactions with Stefan are some of my favorite moments of the season, and while she does end up dying, I think her utilization was as close to perfect as you can get with a series like this. In fact, I'd say it was perfect, and it's weird to think that a character like Vicky Donovan is one of the best written characters in the show. We already touched on Matt earlier in this video, but I also want to mention what he brings out in Caroline. Caroline and Matt don't start getting close until well over halfway through the season, and I felt as though their chemistry and dynamic together was interesting to grow invested in. Yeah, sure, I didn't buy Caroline and Matt as the it couple either, but it was clear from the start that they were being written to be together to benefit from one another. Matt needed a push to stop being hung up on Elena, and Caroline needed a push to stop being a shameless and insecure stereotype. They work well together because both of them grow as a result of being together, and I especially like that Caroline holding resentment towards her mother for being such a workaholic is prevalent in this season. It's not really all that explored, but with a few passing comments and interactions, it does make a difference, and it plants the seeds for what will become one of my favorite interactions and characters in the later seasons. And Caroline as a character as a whole just only gets better and better from here. I think her character arc throughout this first season is going from a snobby and obnoxious, self-centered cheerleader stereotype to a mind-controlled victim and a dysfunctional pick-me girl looking to change her image. Once she falls into a relationship with Elena's ex, she immediately becomes likable, and the charm of Candace King's acting really begins to win you over. This type of attention was given to a C-plot character, mind you, and it's one that actually works for the better, given how Caroline is only going to grow with importance in the later seasons. Liz Forbes is established early on as an important character to amplify the development of others, specifically her daughter Caroline and her friends like Matt, Elena, Stefan, and Damon. She's the sheriff of Mystic Falls and a member of the secret society of vampire hunters, but I appreciate that that's not all she is. She's not all that important or special in the show at this moment, but it is justified by the fact that she is a part of the council and that her entire police force are aware that vampires exist. She's justified. And while she is a little less interesting on duty, she is important enough to stay around, and I welcome the scenes in between when she's cop mode. Alaric is probably the only good thing to come out of Isabel's story. The concept of a vampire hunter who goes undercover at Elena's school and obsesses over the supposed death of his wife makes for some interesting drama, and the reveal that his wife is a vampire and Elena's biological mother, while tacky and cliche, adds depth towards his relationship with Elena. Alaric is one of the better characters this season, but his relationship with Isabel, on the other hand, is really uninteresting and could have worked better if we spent less time with him and other characters and more time giving Isabel an actual personality. I get that her emotions are supposed to be off, but God, she's such a bore to sit through. She wasn't intimidating at all either, and I kind of felt bad for Alaric for having to be relegated to such an underwhelming emotional climax in an otherwise interesting premise. Once again, the idea is good, but it just takes too long to execute. We have nothing bad to say about Lexi. She only appears in one episode and provides essential context to Stefan and Damon's behaviors and their relationship. She drops wisdom to help push Stefan towards achieving his overarching character development, as well as establish some interesting world building and lore and information on how vampires work. All in just one episode. That's queen shit right there. That's a GOAT character, plain and simple. I think she was perfectly utilized, much like Vicky. Jonathan Gilbert being Elena's uncle, birth father, was fine, I guess. I felt as though the mystery had no build-up or impact once the reveal came. Stefan just sort of tells Elena that she's adopted, and they beat around the bush until the finale, where Elena drops the bomb that she already knew. Once again, another plot that could have been explored more instead of favoring less interesting characters, but it's not like Jonathan was all that interesting to begin with. He's essentially just Catherine's lapdog and Isabel's ex-partner. He's in the show to carry out a plan, which would have been much more interesting if they didn't draw out the mystery of his relationship with Isabel or his lack of a relationship with his family. Honestly, I'm tired of talking about characters for now. There are so many people to keep track of in this first season, 19 big ones to be specific, and getting to know and care about 19 characters in your show's first season is a crazy thing to try and achieve. And the fact that only a handful of them die means that there are still way too many players to sit through. In fact, Season 1 we have Elena, Jeremy, Jenna, Stefan, Damon, Bonnie, Sheila, Caroline, Matt, Alaric, Tyler, Vicky, Liz, Jonathan, Isabel, Anna, Pearl, Matt's mom, and Lexi. And that's not even all of them. That's just the important ones. There's also Franklin, Logan, the Lockwoods, Emily Bennett, Catherine. And although Catherine is significant and important to the series moving forward, her flashback sections in this video provide context for her character, yes. However, I feel like I'm gonna save all my thoughts and opinions on her for the next season. She is much more prevalent and important, and I feel like saving some information for the next video to get you guys to click on it. Sorry. And just to preface a little, this is the first time I tackle a series like this, so I want to apologize if the style or execution in the video is a little all over the place. I will get better at making these videos as the series progresses, I promise. You see, the truth is, there's an abundance to complain about and tear apart when it comes to CW shows, but there's also a lot to like once you understand the best way to watch these seasons. Pick a character, or even a couple of characters, and revolve your entire perception of the show on those characters. This is how you'll find the strength to finish a series, and how you'll look back and remember Vampire Diaries with some fondness. For me, on my first viewing, I noticed that Stefan, Damon, Bonnie, Matt, and Caroline were my standouts. So moving forward in this video series, expect me to keep their segments as detailed and opinionated as possible. I'll of course be talking about other characters as well, namely Elena because she's the protagonist of the series after all, but those I've chosen will be focused on for good reason. They're the best of the best in my opinion, and despite their shortcomings in specific chapters of their lives, they easily make watching the show more fun when you focus on watching them succeed and develop. I'm really excited to see where this journey is going to take me. I know Season 2 is better than Season 1, and I'm looking forward to talking about it and the rest of this season, as well as other CW projects. So for now, thank you all so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.
Hello, John. Goodbye, John.
I'm not sad. I'm freaking hungry.
Very good with the whole face thing.
If I see something I haven't seen before, I'll throw $1 at it.